Hey everyone, Curse Deck Builder here, making our way to 10,000 decks assisted, and here we have Arcbound Shikari, another Pauper EDH deck, this one being I'm going to say modular Kindred deck. This is one of our donation decks, and it comes from Sharok, who says, "Hi Cursed, I bring you one of my other Pauper Commander decks. I'm looking for any suggestions on cards I may have missed that can improve on its synergy or strategy or overall performance." They also say that there's once again no budget because it is a Pauper deck. We will definitely go through this deck, and I definitely have a few thoughts here and there and some interesting ideas about it. But before we go further, I've got a question for you, the audience. Do you enjoy this Pauper Commander content? Is this something that interests you, or would you rather click off and watch a regular Commander video? Now, I have a few on the back burner of Pauper decks, but I'll try to do just for now, one a week. And then let me know, because if you guys aren't too interested in it, I don't want to make too many videos, but if you are interested in it, I think maybe I can put a few more here and there. If you'd like to take a look at the deck list we're talking about today, or if you'd like to submit your own deck list to me so that I can make a video assisting your deck, please check the video description down below. Alright, so who is Arcbound Shikari, and why are they the commander of our Boros modular Kindred deck? Arcbound Shikari is a 3-mana Boros creature that's 1 red-white, artifact creature, cat soldier, first strike. They have 2 abilities. The first one is, actually this is the second one we'll say it first, it's modular 2, just for context, as this creature comes in with 2 +1/+1 counters, and when it dies, you can move those counters to another artifact creature. And then, when Arcbound Shikari enters the battlefield, you put a +1/+1 counter on each other artifact creature you control. As a reminder to those who aren't too familiar with Pauper Commander, the rules of Pauper Commander are thus: you can have in your deck only cards that were at least once printed at common rarity. However, your commander can be any uncommon creatures. It doesn't need to be a legendary creature, just that it needs to be uncommon. Hence, Arcbound Shikari is not a legendary creature. So, going back to the deck itself, clearly we have this kind of idea of using artifacts and artifact creatures and +1/+1 counters. But because we only have access to commons within our deck, it's kind of interesting to figure out exactly where and how we're going to take advantage of these counters and what we can do with them. So let's take a look at the deck proper, and generally I do like it. Let's go through it. Let's start with the curve. We can never go wrong that way. So the curve is really, really nice. It has a lot of attention on the 2-drop, but I think that makes sense. We're low to the ground. 3-drop is where our commander is, so I do like that it's lower. 4 and 5-drop, I will actually minimize this so I can see to make sure you guys can see the bar perfect. 4 and 5-drop are fine. I think I don't have too many problems with that. This lens flare actually is reduced in cost because it's affinity, so we only technically have 1 5-drop, and then in 7 we have affinity and affinity as well, so both of these are not 7-drops. And our 8-drop, we'll get back to, is just an 8-drop. So generally our curve is really, really low, and I do really like that. I think we are an aggro deck, and we're trying to speed out our plan and get a lot of damage in. And I do particularly like how we have 3 separate 0-mana creatures, all of which do have 0 power, and the goal is to kind of go wide by putting +1/+1 counters. Now, Shield Sphere is one I don't like as much, due to the fact that it can't attack. Just that's basically it, is the fact that it can't attack. We are an aggro deck, and I do appreciate its power as a 0-cost artifact creature, but I think we can do better by just going into that first mana cost. Like, I think already having Ornithopter and Phyrexian Walker are more than enough of zero mana like artifact creatures that we don't need this 3rd one. I don't expect us to be aggroed out so quickly that we need a 0/6 for 0 that slowly degrades over time. I also think it's worth noting that it doesn't it's not whenever it's dealt damage, it's whenever it blocks, so it can never block as a 0/6. It always blocks at a 0-5, then it blocks at a 0-4, so it can be knocked out of combat particularly quickly. If it could attack, I think I would like it, but it can't, so I'm going to be a little hard on it. Now there's a lot of creatures here I do like, a lot of aggressive creatures. I do like the inclusion of some Infect. I think that's very, very interesting, especially how Ichor Claw Mirror, has that bonus of growing stronger when it's blocked. Generally, I like this deck. I think the thing is it's lacking a little bit of the cohesion that the other deck had. And that's funny to say, because when we think of artifact decks, we tend to think of them as being very synergetic, but there's only so much we can kind of do with our +1/+1 counters, and so much we can do with artifacts. We've got some cool things here, but there's a few more directions I'd like to go into, but we're not quite there yet, so we'll come back to that. Let's talk about the first elephant in the room for me, and that's Maelstrom Colossus. So I think this is a particularly bad deck for this creature. I think, first of all, we have to hit 8 mana. And that's not an easy thing to do. We could get the collection of the mines. I don't really see that happening often. And we could be using these mana rocks, as best as we can. But even then, 8 is just a very, very high, mana cost to reach. And even if we do, what exactly are we getting for it? We're getting a 7/7, which I think is fine, and then we're getting to cast 1 card out of our deck. Now, we are a synergy deck, so there's a lot of low mana cards that aren't particularly good to kind of flip into. Goldmere here is great early game, but late game, it doesn't really want to be, you don't want to cascade into this card. You want something else. Likewise, when we have cards like Fragmentize, which might just not have a good target or a target at all, though that's not true actually, because we'll probably be able to target our own stuff, and we don't want to do that, so we probably would be pretty sad to cast that. Not including things that also like Angel Song that we just generally don't want to cast if it's not the right time, especially, inevitably, because it's our turn when we're casting this creature, and therefore we don't want to prevent all combat damage on our turn. So I'm generally really, really disinterested in this card. I think it is a cool deck in a different Pauper archetype. Definitely one that's more built around ramp, and one that's built more maybe about no, you can't reanimate this, you have to cast it. So it would definitely be in ramp. And there, I don't mind it as much, because there I think you could either get into the other big cards you want to cast, or you can use this to just get more ramp, which you're generally happy with. Something else, and this is something I said in the last deck, and I'm going to add it again here, is we have a lot of mana rocks that I just genuinely don't think we need. Now, these mana rocks are artifacts, and I do like that because it does somewhat fit into our synergy. Not very much so, but somewhat. We can get it back with Mirror Retriever, and there's another 4 mana creature. Ancestral Statue can kind of bring us some cards back. And obviously the affinity cards are good, but overall, I don't really like a lot of these. So Everflowing Chalice, once again, this is a ramp card. This is a card we want to use in decks that want to get to a very, very high mana cost on their spells, and we want to play this for 4 or 6 mana, and this deck just is not going to be able to do that. We also, and I'll bring this up again later, we have very little Proliferate. Proliferate just is not printed at common in any reasonable way in these colors, and for that reason, it's really hard to put counters on this card. So it's just kind of here as an okay card, and I don't think that's where we want to be. Chromatic Star is interesting to me because it's at least an artifact, and the fact that whenever it goes to the graveyard, we draw a card, and then we can bring it back with Mirror Retriever and be happy with that exchange because we get to draw another card when we cast it. So I'm kind of okay with this. I've said this before, don't play cantrips in your commander decks unless they're very, very synergetic. And I think we're missing a lot of the pieces to make this card good, but it's not abysmal, so I think I'm fine with it. This is not a mana rock. Let's look through that. It is a cantrip, and I don't think the 5 life is where we want to be. Is Pyrite, hold on, I'm gonna come out for a second. Is Pyrite Spellbomb? Is this a common? It is. Is this not here? No, it's not. Okay. Let's go back to full screen. I think this would be the one I'd play, right? 2 damage to any target is very, very good because this is removal. And then I don't mind if it's on its, you know, at the weakest point, it's just a cycle. Doesn't feel as bad when the upside is just very, very strong. Works really, really well. I think it works really well with our commander, who has first strike. Yes, that was correct. Sorry, I was trying to remember the keys to go backwards in tabs and not just forward. But it works well with our commander, obviously with first strike, but it's otherwise removal. So I think that's the one I'd play. 5 life is just not very meaningful for us, and I'm down to get rid of it. Wayfarer's Bauble, as mentioned before, this is good in landfall decks and decks that don't have access to green but want to ramp. The exception is usually red-white or red-blue because artifacts are really, really strong in those colors. But here, it's just generally bad. I don't think we don't want basics, and we don't really need the landfall. So or the ramp, honestly. So I think, once again, this is easy to cut. Arcane Signet, I think, is fine. Marble Diamond is pretty bad. It comes in tapped. Mind Stone is the other one I would keep because when you play it, at least you can cycle it, so I don't mind it as much. Prismatic Lens feels pretty bad here. I get that it fixes your mana, but this is pretty low on the scale, honestly. Like, I really, really don't want this in here. So isn't there like a prismatic... There's some kind of prismatic card that draws you a card when it comes into play and then changes color. I wonder if that's a common, because I think I would like that better. Thought Vessel, once again, I feel like you're just putting this in because it's just a commander staple, where I do feel I get where you're coming from. But here, oh boy, we're never going to hit maximum hand size. I don't think we have a lot of meaningful draw in this deck, which is fine. We're playing aggro. We're not trying to be meaningful draw. So with that in mind, I just don't see this ever having any clause outside of just tapping for a colorless. And is there one more? The last one's Commander Sphere, which once again, I'm kind of okay with because you can sacrifice it to draw a card, but it is also the mana cost of our commander, which is very, very funny to me. So there's very, very, like, I don't know, there's not a very large amount of situations that I really like this card in, but I think it's fine. If it was up to me, I think I would keep out of the mana rocks. I would change out of all the artifacts here, actually, I'd change the Pyrite Spellbomb. I would keep Arcane Signet and Mind Stone. Those would be the ones I would keep, and the rest I would probably get rid of. Which gives me enough room for my additions. But before we do that, let's just make sure everything else looks particularly good, and it generally does. I like a lot of the cards here. Faithless Looting. So Faithless Looting is a card that really messes with me sometimes because I find that it's a card that a lot of people want to put into decks. And don't get me wrong, once you have enough lands are easy discards from Faithless Looting. But even then, like, it is card disadvantage, right? You cast Faithless Looting, so you're down 1 card, then you go up 2, and then you go down 2, right? That leaves you down 1 card, and you are the aggro deck. The only time this doesn't leave you down a card is when it's being flashbacked, and then it's 3 mana, which is, once again, commander cost. So, I don't like Faithless Looting in a deck that doesn't particularly care about the graveyard, a deck without madness, a deck without those kind of synergies. Here, we're kind of just betting on the fact that we'll have cards that we don't want, and to me, that's generally planning for failure. Don't get me wrong, it's still a good filtering tool, and I'm not saying to take it out, but it's something that's been on my mind. I saw a bunch of different PEDH decks that have this as their one of their quote-unquote draw spells without graveyard synergies, and it's really caught my eye. It's good, but it's not like universally good, right? So something that's just on my mind. Then when it comes to lands, and this is kind of an extension of that, we can notice we're playing very, very few red cards. Now, I don't think this is like, Shirok didn't mention anything about this being a part of the deck, so I can just kind of see it being a part of the deck, and I'm wondering if there was like a goal to be just much more white than red, but I don't think there's a reason to do so. If we come down here, we can see that the mana production is pretty even, with white just having a little more, whereas you can see 40% and 5% respectively for the symbols in the cards. So we're prepared for a much more even distribution, but we're not, representing that in our cards, which I'll take a really brief second to talk about this because I think it's worth talking about. This is what makes land bases difficult to make. I think people underestimate how difficult it is to make a land base because what they look to do often is just try to like meet needs, even if those needs are not present in the deck. So like this, for example, it makes sense to us that, half of our mana production should be at least in red or in white, right? And we're in a red-white deck, but that's not actually that's not representing the deck itself, and we're actually opening ourselves up to some mana troubles because we should have way more white mana production when you think about it, right? Because that's where our mana is going, so we should have a lot more white production than we have red production, but because almost all the red production, one, comes on dual lands, and two, we have an even distribution of basics, which is wild to me for a deck like this of 22 basics of both colors. I think like therein lies the problem, and we need to adjust. However, I'm going to suggest a bunch of red cards, so I'm not saying take away the red, the mountains or the red, but keep that in mind as we adjust the deck. I will also note that with 37 lands feels a little overkill in a deck like this, with the mana rocks especially, but I'm asking you to take out the mana rocks, so maybe it's not so bad, but I think you could cut to like 36 lands, no problem. Our curve is really, really low, and I'm asking you to cut out the one card that's 5 mana and higher that doesn't get reduced in mana. So I think you'd be fine to cut down a little bit. All right, so let's look at additions. I guess Pyrite Spellbombs here, but we already talked about that. These won't be in an order because I can't see them, so I will react to them as they pop up. We'll find some kind of way to make this work for me because the full screen here looks really nice and you guys don't have to deal with the toolbar, but at the same time, I can't see what the next card is. So the first thing I want to talk about is actually, and to note that we're kind of out of order, and I think that's fine here. Let's zoom out for a second. And it's actually not here, interesting enough. So what's a common? Ashnod's Altar. Can you believe it? This card was printed as a common. So when we have this as a common, we have access to an incredibly powerful card already. So one of the two things that I want in this deck more of is sacrifice outlets, right? I want instant speed sacrifice outlets because it enables us to use that modular in like the best way possible. One, like if our opponents are exiling creatures here and there, we can use Ashnod's Altar or another sacrifice target to immediately kill it, get rid of that exile clause, and put those counters on something else. Otherwise, they would go away. But two, Ashnod's Altar is, it does ramp you. It is something that makes more mana. And with a lot of our cards being colorless, it lets us do a few really fun and dumb things. Now, the next card here, did I not make a copy? There it is. The next card here works really, really well with that, and this is Antler Skullkin. So the way Antler Skullkin works is that if you give persist, right, makes it so that whenever a creature dies, it comes back with a -1/-1 counter. And then if you use Ashnod's Altar to sacrifice a creature with modular after paying this initial cost of giving it persist, it will come back to play. You'll gain 2 mana. The modular +1/+1 counters that remained will be put somewhere else. And then it'll come back with a -1/-1 counter. And then you can repeat the process, right? That 2 mana you got from that first sacrifice will pay for the next persist, so on and so forth. There's only 2 clauses here. 1, it needs to be a white creature, and 2, it needs to at least have modular 2, because otherwise if it's modular 1, when it comes into play, the -1/-1 and the +1/+1 counter will just negate each other. The creature has 0 toughness and will die instantly. Now, what's a really good white creature with modular 2? It is your commander. Modular 2, white creature. I should be using this. Modular 2 and white creature. So with these 3 cards together, you have an infinite combo that will put an infinite number of +1/+1 counters throughout your board. Just because it's pauper does not mean it's not strong. So this is something I think can really easily fit into your deck. I think it's worth running. The aggro plan of this deck is good, but it does fall to a lot of basic kind of defenses. People just being really good with their removal. If you go too tall on a creature, they can exile it or destroy it otherwise, leaving you with nothing. And any form of like small red board clears that deal damage, or black as well, that deal damage across the board are really, really good against you, because naturally a lot of our creatures here are small. So having this backup is pretty good. There is another one, I believe. I saw this off someone else, and we have all the pieces, where you have Ashnod's Altar, you have like Foundry Inspector, which reduces the cost of our cards, and then you have Mirror Enforcer, a Mirror Retriever, and the 4-mana creature that also takes cards from your graveyard. And between the two of them, you can do it infinitely, because with the mana reduction, Ashnod's Altar will pay for the one you pull out. So you sacrifice the 4-mana one, and then you have enough mana. So you get 2 mana, 1 mana for the Mirror Retriever, you have 1 left over, Retriever gets the 4-mana one, you sacrifice the Retriever, you're up to 3 mana, which pays for the other one, so on and so forth. So you have infinite ETBs and infinite death triggers. So that's something else you can do, and I have a card coming up that can take advantage of that, but it's just worth noting that that's just a bonus thing you can do with Ashnod's Altar. I know this isn't supposed to be a combo deck, but having access to these things I do particularly like. Just like in the previous deck, I think we should be playing Ephemerate. Even more so here, because we have a very good Ephemerate target in our command zone. So even if we just use the first half as protection or something, just like, the boost of getting our commander's ability again, on upkeep, if our commander's around, we have a very, very good target just laying around to put a +1/+1 counter on all our creatures. Now, when we blink our commander, we do not get to take advantage of the modular thing. It's a little unfortunate, but we'll do what we can. That bonus of getting the +1/+1 counter on the entire team, I think, is just really, really good, and one of the main ways I think you get ahead. So I think losing the modular here and there is not too much of a problem. After which, I've got these 2 cards here, Return Triumphant and Recommission, and they both do basically the same thing of reanimating a creature, perhaps our commander. They're kind of a little different though. Return Triumphant is notable because it gives Young Hero roll that says every time it attacks, if it has 3 or less toughness, you put a +1/+1 counter on it. I do really like that, especially with some of our other modular creatures, because it enables them to grow past modular 1, for example, to like modular 3, quote unquote. But it also affects our commander, right? Our commander will only gain that 1 additional +1/+1 counter, but it's still something, bringing it up to 3 +1/+1 counters, and then when it dies, you can put those on another creature. Now, obviously our commander can grow past that, but the Young Hero role only has that limit, so it's worth considering. Recommission, though, I really, really like, because not only does it just put a +1/+1 counter on it just generally, which means it's just kind of better than the previous one, but it also just hits any artifact, notably Ashnod's Altar, which is a very, very strong artifact to be reanimating. So with that in mind, I think this is also a very, very easy addition, even if the main thing you're going to do with this at a certain point in the game is just let your commander die, or when your commander dies, just leave them in the graveyard as opposed to putting them back in the command zone, and then using Return Triumphant or Recommission to bring them back into the game at a certain point where it would just be really infeasible? It would just be really silly to try to summon your commander again from the command zone. Let's see what's next. Oh, Reckless Fireweaver. Yeah, so Reckless Fireweaver I think is just really, really good here. Straight up is an improvement on the more artifacts you play and the more non-creature artifacts, which is something this deck really cares about, creature artifacts. So having something that cares about all artifacts is really, really nice. But also as an aggro deck, I think you're going to be just really, really happy with this card. It's just going to do a tremendous amount of damage as long as it's on the battlefield. And it is one of the payoffs that you can have to, like the blinking in and out, the Mirror Retriever. The Mirror Retriever, and I can't remember the other card, but that combo gets a lot out of this card, because now you're dealing damage on each ETB, which is really, really good, and that's how you finish off opponents. The other version of this is Impact Tremors, which, once again, this is not a card I thought of as common, but yeah, it's a common. play this card. Once again, it makes all of your creatures just do a lot more damage. If you think about like in the terms of some of your early creatures are like 1/1s, like modular 1 creatures, in order to deal the damage that Impact Tremors offers, right? You play Impact Tremors and then you play this creature. To do equivalent damage, the creature has to go through 3 attack steps. And that's just really, really important to consider. So all of a sudden, all of your creatures, all of your ETBs are just like really contributing to the damage. And this also applies to our previous creature, but I just thought of it now. So don't underestimate the power of this card. This card is really, really good. And once again, it is a way to, when we have infinite ETBs, we now have a way to defeat all our opponents. Volt Charge. I want to talk about this earlier, Proliferate. So we have not a lot of good Proliferate in these colors at common, and none of them can be used more than once. So if I had to pick one, which I'd like to, it would be Volt Charge. It is removal and it is Proliferate. It also gives us the advantage, like on an attack, you can just use it to burn anything and immediately pump up all your creatures with a +1/+1 counter and get a lot of damage through. I think it's worth noting that this is like that Proliferate is the equivalent of summoning your commander, as adding a +1/+1 counter to all your creatures is just really, really strong. Now, I don't know if there's, I think I told you to take out the card that has counters in it. Let me just see, that's an artifact. Which one was that? Oh yeah, the Everflowing Chalice. So if we have the Everflowing Chalice, if you want to keep that in, this is the Proliferate to do it, but I really don't think that's good enough. Instead, I think this is just a good removal spell with the bonus of pumping your creatures. After this, I have at least 2 pieces of equipment, Great Sword of Tyr and Armory of Iroas. Both of them have the main clause on them that whenever the creature attacks, you get a +1/+1 counter. Great Sword of Tyr is colored. It is white, both to equip and to play, but it is stronger because it taps down a blocker, which I think is really, really impressive. Whereas Army of Iroas just has the benefit of just being colorless. It costs more and it's not as good, but I think you want both. These abilities are just really, really great. You throw them onto any creature, including your commander, and you just start growing them. You throw them onto Ornithopter, and you're just getting hits in, and I think that's just very much so worth it. So both of these I think are pretty easy inclusions, and you can get pretty far with them. Let's see what else. Kuldotha Rebirth caught my eye. I don't know to what degree I love it, because we have a really hard time improving our 1/1s when they are not artifact creatures. But I do think it's notable because, like, I like the sacrifice clause because we can take advantage of that, and I do like, you know, turning a mana rock into 3 1/1s when we're in an aggro deck. And with the Impact Tremors, this does do like 6 total damage when you cast this, so I really like that as well. Is that correct? Did I do that math right? No, it's 9, right? Each one does 3 damage? Yeah, so 9 total damage, 3 to each opponent. That's still really, really good. Do I love this? I don't think so. I think if the deck had more equipment, I would probably like it a little more, but it does catch my eye and I did want to bring it up. And then we have Atog. Atog is interesting. Once again, this is a card I don't know if I necessarily want to suggest, because in Pauper Commander, this is a lot more all in. We don't have any mass reanimate spells. We don't have any mass token generation. So because of that, wait, this is banned in Pauper. But that means it's legal in Pauper Commander, right? Huh. I did not look that up. Interesting. I will say, either way, I think this is a lot better in one-on-one because you just need to hit 20, whereas Atog has to hit 40 3 times. I mean, it doesn't have to do that, but like that's the equivalency between the 2 formats. So I'm really medium on this card, but I mean, if you can't play it anywhere else in Pauper, I think this is a fun place to play it. And I think this is my last card, and it's Knighted Myr, or Mir if you prefer. And I do really like this card. I think it has the nice little adapt. I think the fact that it gets double strike every time it gets a +1/+1 counter makes it really, really really strong. And I generally like it. I think it's a little clunky, I'm not gonna lie. If you ever have to use that adapt, something's gone wrong because your commander should be more accessible. It also is 3 mana, but once this guy starts swinging, he's really, really strong. If we just think in the way of like, you know, that first turn, you can attack with it. It's like a 3/3 double strike. And then if you can keep the pressure on, like if you can equip one of the equipment onto this creature, I think you're going to be very, very successful, because it goes from like, let's see, like 3/3, 4/4 double strike, so that's 8 damage, 5/5 double strike, that's 10 damage. So it goes up to every attack, but because of the double strike, very few things can like trade with it. And then when you have Knighted Mirror and you have the equipment just together, you're not putting more mana into this combo, you're just attacking every turn. Obviously, there is a downside that this creature does not have modular, so all those counters will not go anywhere when it dies, but being a white creature means you can use that artifact to give it persist, and I do particularly like that. So I think this is a really easy inclusion that I think is very, very strong. And I think that's generally my my additions. Oh, there's Ashnod's Altar. Generally, I think this deck is in a really good place. I think it presents itself as a very, very big aggro deck. And I wonder, to an extent, I'm going to quit out of this mode. The one thing I really do feel that it's missing, let's see, each opponent draw. I think what it's missing is card draw. And I'm wondering if any of those, like, let your opponents draw cards are at common. Your temple is under attack. Okay. Yes, play this. Play this very much. Okay. I didn't know this was legal, right? So what I really like about this card, we can do this again. What I really like about this card is that it is divination. You do draw one of your opponent's 2 cards, but I think that's okay. You're an aggro deck. You want to make friends, and you also want to, you don't really mind as long as all your opponents don't get advantaged. Let them draw some cards and pressure the other opponents. But the Pray for Protection is also just very, very strong. It's another fog ability. We should also be playing Prismatic Strands, right? That as well, to prevent all damage of a color of your choice, and then it has a flashback ability, which makes Faithless Looting better, I will say, and the flashback is just tapping a white creature that you control. Can't just hit back that way. Let's go back here for a second. Your temple is under attack, I think, though, is the really, really strong one. I really like that it has some card draw, and I really, really do like that it gives the indestructibility. I think you probably play this as an instant speed divination more often, but every now and then I think this will save your board and let you take out a player, and I think that is very, very noteworthy. So this is the last addition I will say. But going back to the deck, part of the reason I wanted to suggest the infinite combos is because I do still think that your aggro plan, it's strong, but it's very like straightforward. So your opponents will see you building up a board from a mile away, and they'll know how to kind of like deal with you. And with that in mind, I think I'd really like just that combo in there so that you have a backup win, and otherwise we're just going to try to grind them out with damage. Obviously, we have some really good cards, Ginger Brute and Ichor Claw, that both represent such a dangerous kind of ceiling, and if you play the Mirror Knight, that's just another one that we can kind of attack in these 3 kind of angles, where you have certain creatures that are just very much so threats that need to be dealt with, the general building of an army, and finally a combo win. All right, and that's about it. Thank you so much for sending the deck, Shirok. I've been enjoying this Pauper EDH, these decks. I hope you guys have. Once again, let me know. If this ain't your jam, I don't want to be putting it on the channel too often, because I don't want to put on videos that people aren't interested in. But I find it interesting, so let me know. Thank you for sending the deck. It's fun. It makes me want to build something. I'll see a bit before I start sitting down and building something. If you want to send me another draft of this deck or any deck, there's a link in the video description down below. And if, like Shirok, you want to make your video into one of my donation videos, there's a link down there as well. And finally, if you could like, comment, subscribe. The channel hit 500 last weekend, and that was mind-blowing for me, so I'm just very, very, very happy with that. I'm probably going to make an outro or like a credits video because I'm tired of saying these things. But until then, thank you so much for watching, and good luck with the deck. I think it's a lot of fun. I love this art, and I'm excited to see more of it. All right, good luck.